In this session of the Purple Coffee Podcast, I speak to Michael ONeal about the importance of saying yes to opportunity, but no to everything else. Hello and welcome to session 32 of the Purple Coffee Podcast, inspiring entrepreneurial stories from some of the world's finest. I am your host, Turndog. On this occasion, I connect with the awesome and joy to behold Michael ONeal, the main man and host behind the Solopreneur Hour Podcast. And my oh my, did he throw an awesome story my way. It was all in aid of my book, The Successful Mistake, and of course this very podcast. We'll be getting to Michael and who he is and what he does soon, and of course the conversation. But I just want to touch upon how this all came about, because I came across Michael as I was searching some of the world's finest podcasts, and my oh my, was I blown away by him. He just had a fantastic charisma, and I just knew he would be a great addition to the Successful Mistake. So I reached out to him and we managed to book a time in the diary, and we connected over Skype whilst he was at one of Nick Unsworth's conferences. So as you can imagine, he's there sat with, beach and palm trees in the background while I'm chilling in cold and wet and dreary Yorkshire. But I immediately felt a bit of a buzz and adrenaline, because that is the kind of charisma Michael ONeal throws at you. Even over Skype, it's like he's slapping you around the face with his fists. It's crazy. And he told me all about his great mistake, but his actual mistake was pretty difficult to define. But what an amazing and inspiring journey he took me down. This is one of the most inspiring conversations I've had of late, and I cannot wait to share it with you. Oh yes, the actual mistake might be difficult to pinpoint, but the entire journey that he's gone from being a successful employee and being a successful entrepreneur, but this whole issue of knowing when to take the plunge and when to take the risk is something I'm sure every single one of you can empathise with. It's taken Michael some time, but bit by bit the warning signs are there, and I think that is the true lesson you can take from all this. Understanding where the warning signs come along, and when to listen to your gut, and when to listen to the universe without coming across all frilly-nilly and such. And it all kind of hinges on this idea of saying yes to opportunity and no to the chaos, no to everything else, and being excited about the possibility of getting into bed with a new client or a new project, but doing so for the right reasons. It's all about going for success that makes sense to you and not doing it for the sake of money or fame or metrics or anything like that. I love Michael's journey, and he is doing such amazing things now with the Solopreneur Hour. It's a podcast on the up. It's recently been named as one of Stitcher's finest, and man, he's just going places, and I'm so glad to be part of his journey, and I'm so glad to have him be part of mine. So you'll be able to find all the info regarding Michael and his world at tdog.co/purplecoffee32. I encourage you to check out all his links and whatnot, and on there there'll be all the show notes and tweetables and everything else you need. But before we kick into the conversation, I've created a quick story in aid of Michael, because that's what I do. I like to create stories and generally write and chat nonsense. So that is what I've done. So I will read that to you now, and then we'll get straight into this inspiring chat, because it is an awesome one. So here we go. If you type Michael ONeal into Google Images, an array of dudes fill your screen. Some have six packs and abs, others have Hollywood-esque eyes. Some are young, a few are old, one or two look sketchy as frick. But there in amongst the abs and sketchiness sits our Michael and his enticing and rocking smile. He's lived a roller coaster of a life, watching success come into it before leaving again, and touching shoulders with some inspiring giants. But his true story kicks into gear when he started to consider what made him him. This led him to Solopreneur Hour HUD, a podcast that helps the unemployable find job security. And yes, as an entrepreneur, you're more than likely unemployable, which makes Michael ONeal a man to know and follow. He's awesome and full of beans. I literally imagine he springs out of bed each day whilst chirping birds brush his teeth for him. Morning, people. Here's Michael and me chatting and such. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for joining me. I'm delighted to have with me Michael ONeal of the Solopreneur Hour, which is a fantastic podcast. And Michael himself is an entrepreneur who helps what he classifies as the unemployable, which I feel past bosses would say I very much fit into. So most of the time as entrepreneurs, not the best employees, are we? Anyway, Michael, thank you so much for being with me.
Matthew, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
It's an absolute
it's my pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure from my end, and I'm very jealous. You've just showed. Do you want to just pan around a little bit and just show us that amazing view?
This is my view right now. There it is.
So all the viewers can be jealous of that. And if you're listening to this and not watching, there's like a hook fin type steamboat, lots of yachts, a lovely harbour, sunny day. And here I am in Yorkshire just as the weather's starting to turn, and it's dark, so not nearly as nice.
Alas.
Oh, well.
My apologies for having perfect weather here in San Diego.
I know. I keep speaking to these people who are, in places like San Diego and California and Las Vegas, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to be there at all.
Well, no. It's time, buddy. Location freedom, you have that.
That's it. Although my little boy, I think, would have something to say about that.
But, love it. Plus, the ladies would love you because of your accent. That.
This is true.
That's right.
The ladies in Yorkshire do not appreciate my accent nearly as much.
No, they don't. But if I went there, then I would have the accent of the Hollywood stars, and that would work for me.
We need to do like a entrepreneurial exchange.
That's right. A little 6-month swap. It's perfect.
Sounds good.
I'm in.
You have to be up for some babysitting though, so hope it's all good.
I'm okay with the kid.
He's a pretty good kid. Anyway, before we get into your grammar mistake, because those regular listeners and viewers will know this is In Aid of the Success Mistake, a little book I'm writing about an entrepreneur's grand faux pas and how they switcherooed around. And it's been an amazing journey, and I'm delighted to have people like Michael on board. But first, Michael, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is you do over in your little world.
Oh, I love that question. It's my favorite. Just hand over the reins to me. Well, I'm a drummer. I'll just talk about drumming for the next 20 minutes.
Nice.
I have a show. It's called the Solopreneur Hour. It's a podcast, and it is as you mentioned, a show for the people I consider proudly unemployable. And I think once people have done too much of the reading, they've read too much, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and 4-Hour Work Week, and E-Myth Revisited, and those kinds of books. And they've hung around, like I'm at a business mastermind right now, which is why I'm at this hotel. Once you hang around with these people enough and you see the lives that they're living and you surround yourself with those people, it's almost impossible to go punch the clock for that middle manager that doesn't know as much as you do. And it is unfortunately a very one-way street, as my girlfriend is discovering, because she is going from being employed in this very sort of amazing design technical startup to almost is at the point where she can't stand, I shouldn't say can't stand being there, but it's the seed has been planted, and it's very hard to go back. It ratchets and you can't go back the other way. So
it's like the travel bug.
Yeah, kind of. She's taken the blue pill. And so now it's like the challenge then is, well, now that that's the case, how do we do anything with that? And what's the plan? And so what I attempt to do is bring enough people on my show that have been in that situation and have done well. And I don't sort of pride myself on, we're going to give actionable content for an hour. What I want to do is give an entertaining hour. And if there's some actionable content that falls away, I have an idea in my head of sort of how I want the interview to go, and it's very conversational, and I steer the conversation in a way that I hope that the audience really appreciates where this person came from and can relate to it, so that they go, okay, I can totally do that. They did that, I can totally do that. And that's what the show is about.
And I encourage everyone watching and listening to check it out. I'll be putting a link below this video and audio and everything, and some of the guests you've had on. Solopreneur.com. Some of the guests you've had on, truly inspirational. I mean, you could spend some serious hours on that website and come away with some good things. But like you say, it's not always about, what tips you can pick up. It's just surrounding yourself with like-minded people. But be warned, if you do get into the entrepreneurial game and it doesn't work out, your life is ruined forever, because I can't imagine going back. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, and I think that the number one issue that most people have when they're working their desk job and they want to do something else is just there's a fear. There's a fear of the unknown that is there. And because that's always in the back of my mind, I do my best to try to relate my guest's journey to where I think they are right now, where I think my listener is. Because the more they can go, oh, wait a second, I totally had that same kind of job. I have that same kind of skill set, but I didn't even know that could be a thing. I didn't even know I could do anything with that. And that's kind of where I think people find a lot of the value.
Very much so. And I think for an entrepreneur going back into employability, that's the fear of the known. All of a sudden, it's like what your work day is going to be every day. And it's like, that scares the hell out of me. I want the craziness where I don't know whether I'm going to be able to pay the mortgage this month. That's the thrill of it.
It's the fear of the unknown versus the dread of the known.
Absolutely. Well,
which I think is a great way to phrase that.
I'm liking it. You can have it. My gift to you. Steal it.
Fine.
Steal it. It's all good.
Done. I'll start signing as we're talking. No.
I'm liking it. Well, this is all in aid of your great mistakes. I'm going to pass it over to you again in a few seconds so you can just share that story with us, because I've spoken now with 130 plus and counting entrepreneurs about their big faux pas and how they turned it around, the journey it took them on, and the lessons that they've learned. And I feel like it relates a lot with what you were talking about then. It shows that these people are just human, and that they've seen the dark side. They've not always been this big person who earns millions and has the fame. They were once upon a time, and to an extent, are still human beings, just making mistakes and plodding on through and pivoting and just hustling along. So I'm going to pass it over to you to share your own tale, and we'll take it from there. And I've got a few questions for you.
So my tale is, what am I sharing? I didn't pre-read
your
anything.
Big mistake. So your big mistake. And how it all went down, that big journey it's taken you on, what you've taken from it, the lessons learned, and how you're here and still standing and loving, the lifestyle that you live. Cool.
Mine is. I'm gonna switch out the word mistake. Well, no, I won't. I'll shoehorn it in. So, I was a designer and a web guy for 18 years, and I was good at it, and I was plugged into the community, and I really appreciate the aesthetic of just about everything. I really notice the nuance of design in almost everything I see, from a car to a chair to a website. So I think that's what drove me initially to be part of this career and work for an agency and kind of be in that design world. And for a while, I started in 1994 professionally doing web design, which was early. And I became, through my career, sort of through the 90s, became, web director, then art director, then finally a creative director of a Fortune 500 company. And that art director to creative director, the art director ended in 2002, 2001, and the creative director started in 2004. So I had 2 years where I was working as a freelancer. And it was around that time that I'd started reading some of these books, these entrepreneurial type books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and things like that. And I realized about 6 months into this unbelievable job that I had. I was working for this Fortune 500 company. They were paying me a ton of money. I bought a house with the salary that I'd been paid, had a couple of cars. I was restoring a vintage Porsche. Life was good. That I hated it and that I was unemployable. And despite the money and despite the I'm doing what everybody would want to do, it was awful. It was not a fulfilling thing at all. And so I would have maybe stayed in that world. So the mistake was first kind of staying longer than I should have, because knowing what I know now, I'm like, oh gosh, I totally could have monetized and done what I know. I could have done it way earlier than I did, right? But what happened was I lost, and I won't go into the details, but I lost both of my parents 7 months apart. And it was a hurricane that went through my life. I literally lost everything because my life was mom falls and breaks her hip, needs 24 days of rehab, insurance pays for 10, it's $2,000 a day. That's welcome to America and the U.S. healthcare system. And so living that for 4 years literally completely bankrupted me. I lost all of that stuff that I had before. And in order to reset, and this was the big shift for me, is that the mistake was staying longer than I should have and sort of being what's the right word? I was sort of a, indentured servant to my clients, because I would do all the work for them and then they would pay me whenever they wanted to. And as a freelancer, that's like the death knell, because you don't know when you're going to pay bills, and having all this chaos in my life was very difficult to kind of book new clients. And I found myself, out of money. And so I'd had a guy that I'd met in a really random way, but he had a big conglomerate of companies. He was a very, very, very wealthy dude. And at my most desperate, I said, well, maybe I can connect with this guy, and maybe he needs some websites. Maybe I can. My mind's still the wrong way. I'm still thinking I can work for someone and be paid. So the mistake is still perpetual. And the mistake was shifted in a split second on his couch, because we met. He's a brilliant guy, very, very, very wealthy, with a B, kind of wealthy. And he said, Michael, I could help you right now. In fact, I could put you into a job where you could make $250,000 a year tomorrow. He goes, but you've had so much chaos in your life for the last 4 years that you haven't even had a chance to mourn. And it was the first moment in that whole span of chaos that I lived that I said, wait a second. My dad died, and then, oh yeah, my mom died. It was the first time it had ever dawned on me that I wasn't in survival, but it was like, hey, you're a human. You just lost your parents. Like, deal with that first. And so I lost it on this guy's couch. And one of my goals as a successful adult was that my dad was the kind of guy that would drive cross country in a Winnebago, like a camper, but wouldn't jump on a flight to Paris for 6 hours. And that's, again, is a big difference between, I think, people in Europe and the UK and America, is that we don't get out and travel the world as much as the rest of the world does. And I always wanted to surprise them with a trip to Europe and then to Ireland. I'm Michael Timothy ONeal, so I've got shamrocks flying out of me bum, right? So I decided that on this guy's couch in that moment that I was going to take them to Europe anyway. So I got their ashes, and I got a little Italian Parmesan cheese shaker, and I put their ashes in it, and I went all around Europe for 4 months. And I took them, they're on the beaches of Normandy, they're in the Sistine Chapel, and sometimes I had to go like a little Shawshank Redemption with it, because you're not allowed to spread ashes in the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
Like I just sneak in, kind of like, oh yeah, what's up, excuse me, But I came back from that experience after 4 months, and a couple things happened that were so poignant that led me to where I am today, which were, well, first of all, I had $14 when I landed in the U.S. And not like I better go hit the ATM, but I had literally $14 left to my name. And I was 37 going, okay, then what happens, right? And then the other part of it was, because it was so abrupt the way I'd lost my mother. My dad was a little more expected. He had sort of a long-term heart thing. But my mom was really a surprise. And I realized then that I would never, when I saw opportunity to either give a hug or go on a trip or do something, I would say yes first and figure out how I was going to do it later. Which I've now learned that if I go to the most successful mastermind in the world, that's what they follow. They say yes first, then they figure out the logistics of how to make it happen. And that's to fun things, not to more work. They don't say yes to work. They say yes to, oh yeah, I will go on that trip, or yes, I will invest in that thing, or yes. They say yes first. And the other thing is that I was never going to work an hour for $1 again. And that's when all of those books, I finally said, all right, dude, F this. You're going to actually pay attention to what they said. And that was 5 years ago in June, and I haven't worked an hour for $1 since. So that was the real shift for me.
Oh my
I'll
God.
let you talk. So I've just talked for like 20 minutes.
Oh man, I mean that is powerful stuff, man. What an amazing journey, and obviously so much heartache in there, and so much,
Yeah.
you know, difficult times. And I think as people, we sometimes forget that we focus so much on, oh, we want to build a business, that we forget that sometimes life will throw these curveballs that aren't, you know, business related. You know, family, friends, loved ones, you know, location, you know, bad things can happen, and you know, life-changing things can happen at
That's right.
at any given moment.
And I will say that to that point, and something that I've now taken on as a mantra of myself, but even today, I had a coaching call where I was coaching I have a few personal coaching clients. I had to use this on him, the same thing, which was never compare up, always compare down. People have a real tendency this guy has been a successful animator in Hollywood for 35 years. And all he does is and he's making a lot of money. But every word out of his mouth is how much better everybody else is. And I say, dude, you don't understand how what the rarefied air that you live in. You've made a career out of doing something that a literal handful of people in the world have ever done. So it's like at my lowest point, and this is a weird, unfortunate tragedy that happened to coincide with my lowest point, which is Hurricane Katrina had hit the United States, and everywhere you looked on television, there were these videos of some little 9-year-old black kid who doesn't have any education, and everybody in his family had died that last day, and he'd lost everything in his life. And he's literally standing on the roof of his house watching dead bodies float by. And it was this awful, like, oh my God. And I remember thinking, all right, of all the things that have just gone wrong in my life, and I'm out of money, and my parents have passed away, and I don't know what I'm going to do, it's not as bad as what that poor kid is feeling right now. I have a skill set. I live in America. I have opportunity. I have, all these things going for me. And I really got in the mindset of comparing down to go, okay, I know that I think my stuff is awful right now, but that poor kid has it so much worse than I do right now. And that has really driven me for the last few years, because it's something we do inherently. We look at those people that are so successful and we go, why am I not there yet? But we don't look at the people that are in similar situations that are nowhere near as great or as talented or have as much potential as we do.
Absolutely. And I think we all sort of need that perspective from time to time where it just forces in a moment and realize actually it could be a great deal worse.
So much worse.
I mean, now we're on computers, we're on Skype, how many people in the world do not even have a fraction of kind of what? So that kind of perspective is absolute golden from time to time. And I want to just backtrack a little bit to when you were working for these companies, even before your freelancer days. Did you have dreams of working for yourself then? Have you always felt like you're an entrepreneur at heart, or were you happy to be working for someone else? Like, what drove you into the freelance world in the first place? Yeah,
it's a good question. I was actually very content to do it, content to be in it, because I liked the agency world. I liked the design agency and the sort of hustle and bustle of that. What I didn't love is when I had my dog. I have a different dog now, but I didn't like going to work when it was dark and coming home when it was dark. And he doesn't know the difference. He was just like, "What's up? What happened to playing at some point?" Going and that actually really tore at me. And it was less about that exact thing, but more about what it represented, which is, why can't I do the things I love and still make a living with it? So it hadn't. I have to say that none of it fully, I didn't feel like I had it's not the right thing. It didn't even dawn on me that the idea that I could be doing this and have ultimate freedom hadn't quite sunk in yet, that I could do it. So I was working at an agency, and it turned out that the guy that I was working for was pretty shady, and he had done some very shady things to the books. And so I left, and I found myself unemployed, not unemployable yet. But I think I'd had a couple of clients from that agency that said, "Hey, if you're leaving, we're following you. We want you to keep working for us." So I instantly picked up some work and was like, "All right, I'll just do this for a while until until I find a gig."
Yeah.
I was still in until I find a gig mode. And I stayed there I did that for a couple of years, and I was hustling, and it was okay. But I did that for a couple of years until I was hired by this big Fortune 500 company, which paid me a ton of money. And then it was like 6 months into it, I was like, oh no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like, this is not this isn't optional anymore. I realized that between my personality of being very opinionated and not being diplomatic about my opinions, and the fact that I was right all the time. No, I'm kidding. That doesn't play well, and then I would see a substandard product come out of this kind of group mentality that I was like, oh, I realize I can't do this anymore. And I hung in there for 6 more months until we were on both sides. We were like, yeah, I'll see you later. They were like, here's a severance, and I was like, thank you, and I'm out of here, kind of thing. And that was it.
I suppose you'd kind of dip the toe into the land of freedom with the freelancer gig. But when you're freelancing, yeah, you're working for yourself, but you're also, like you say, at the mercy of your clients. You're still kind
That's
of
right.
employed in a contract kind of way. So
That's right.
then going back
And
into
I
the
did that
gig,
again another 3 years. Another 3 years after that job, I still freelanced, for another couple years. Yeah, 3 years. Yeah, probably 3 years more, where I did that as the way that I was going to sustain my income. Yeah. And it still hadn't dawned on me yet. It was still not there.
So it goes to show
2009.
It goes to show that these feelings can drag on for, and that fear, because I mean, it all comes down to, I suppose, fear of some kind. Like you said, a fear of the unknown. It's like, this is the safer option. I don't know what's ahead. This is the more sensible route. Obviously, you had that.
Well, it was that, but it was also, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Okay.
I didn't know about this yet. Like it wasn't in my collective consciousness yet that people lived like this and could do jobs like this. And I wouldn't learn about that until October of 2009, when I first sort of got into, no, it was a little before that. That's wrong. It was like June or July of 2009, where I started learning about internet marketing. And then I learned about network marketing. And between those two things, I was like, wait a second. There's a whole world out here of people that are like have ultimate time freedom and location freedom and financial freedom and residual income. And as soon as I learned it existed, then it was game on. Then I dug in.
Was this around the time when you had that moment? Looking at the Hurricane Katrina thing, being in the billionaire's house. Was this all kind of around the same time?
It was so 2008 is when I had the moment where I understood that. Then I did the parent thing in early 2009. Got back in June of 2009, June 3rd rather of 2009 is when I arrived back in the States, and it was that night, actually, when my buddy was like, hey, my buddy's having he just got engaged. We're having a little party. Do you want to come? And I asked the guy what he did. And he said, well, I look where it's raining and I put down a tarp. And I thought that was kind of a douchey answer. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. And then it turned out that he was a guy that was he would look on Google for things that people were already searching for, hard goods. Then he would go to China and find a product that fit that search and literally buy an entire container full of it, send it to a fulfillment house, buy 2 killer converting web pages, and drive tons of traffic with Google Ads to it. And he would make like $5,000 a day. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know any of that existed. So when I said, I want to work with you, I want to learn this, and he made me stop and read a few books. He wouldn't work with me until I got in the right mindset and understanding of kind of where he would be teaching from, like what position he'd be teaching from. And then I read the books and I dug right in, because when I do it big. So I dug right in, and then I worked for him. I actually was doing freelance web stuff, but it was okay because I was learning this new trade, and it felt like it was a new opportunity. And I ended up launching my own first product, which was a social media training course, about 1 year later. And that began the real monetization of this journey. And now with the podcast, it's crazy. The podcast has done really well in the first year of its existence.
Oh, absolutely. So it's basically just several little warning signs, well, some larger than others, in a space of a year, just kind of pointing you down this road of like, there is a different way forward. You enjoy freedom. There's a way for you to have it. You just need to open your mind and, express yourself in a new way. And
I kept saying yes. I kept saying yes. Yeah, I will. I will try that. Someone said, "Hey, do you want to come and check out this?" I didn't know anything about network marketing. Do you want to come and go to our little annual Rah Rah event in Arizona or in Anaheim? I was living in Denver. I was living in Colorado. This was California, and I didn't have any money. I just come back, and I was like, yes. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was like, yeah, let's do it. And the money came to me. It was like a crazy little. It was almost like a secret. And then I had a woman that had done really well in that world, and she said a couple things will happen. Number one, you won't understand why people have regular jobs after a while, which I don't. And you'll start losing track of zeros, which I can totally see. I mean, it's a weird universe when people are complaining, in the internet marketing world, oh yeah, I only made $3,000 from, this affiliate thing this month. And it's like $3,000. That's $36,000 a year. That's more than so many people make. The median income of the United States is $51,000. And you made almost all of that with one thing that was a throwaway. So it's like you really get into that thing where you can lose track of zeros. So it's weird.
Absolutely. I mean, I always associate the opportunity. I mean, one of my favorite books is Yes Man. It's the whole idea of saying yes and being open to the world. And that kind of takes you down completely the crazy unforeseen paths, whereas the opposite of that is saying no. It's keeping yourself closed-minded and within a world that you only know. And it sounds like for so long you kept ultimately staying in this world because it was just the done thing, and then once you started saying yes, this entire whole new world unraveled.
It's like now I live here. There's always so many reasons why people can't do things. And it's the first thing that when someone goes, I don't know, maybe, and then their mind floods with reasons why they can't do something. That's just human nature. Versus, I had a guy that I launched a podcast for. His name was David Wood. He started a show called The Kick-Ass Life. And he was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, which is people train 6 months, and they hike, and they get gear. It's $20,000 to do the hike, and it's it's a high altitude, and you have to have all the right gear, and it's like a big deal to do this, one of the highest mountains in the world. And he was at a bar. He was flying to Africa on Thursday. He was at a bar at one of the British Virgin Islands on Tuesday, having a conversation with a guy, and they had a few drinks, and he goes, oh, you should come to Kilimanjaro. The guy goes, okay. He was in Kilimanjaro 2 days later. Imagine the logistics of that. Like, he is running business. He's got a wife. He's got to get a ticket. He's got to get the gear. There's so much that has to happen. But because he was a successful guy, he already knew, I would love to do that. And he sorted out the details after he had said yes. And that, if there's anything people take from this show, is that if you even experiment with doing this, if you always wanted to live in San Diego, I will find you 50 ways you can do that. But you'll find 100 why you can't. Yeah. And that's the difference, because you say, oh, your kid would kill me. And I think your kid would adjust. I moved about 5 times when I was a kid, and I'm fine. And it's like, kids adjust. The money part, you can sort that out. The lodging part, you can sort that out. It's not that hard. We just really build it to this thing in our brain.
No,
so
absolutely. I think that's so right. And I think as entrepreneurs, and the key thing that you said earlier was, it's not necessarily saying yes to a client or to a job, but it's saying yes more to opportunity. When someone says, do you want to go and do this trip? It's like, yes. And I think that's a really great thing. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur and get to that pinnacle, just start saying yes and open your eyes and be open-minded to all these different experiences, because they maybe not all will lead to the promised land, but at some point they will get you to where you want to go. Whereas if you keep saying no, you're just going to stay exactly where you are.
Well, go watch the movie, right, with Jim Carrey. Go watch Yes Man and see how
Read
See
the
how his
book.
life shifts.
So much better.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Probably so much better. Is that based on a true story?
Yeah. I
It
feel
is.
like, yeah, he's called Danny Wallace, and he's a journalist at heart, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like some of it was probably fictionalized. But in essence, I think for a year, said yes to just about everything, and I'm sure the stories
Yeah.
within it were fictionalized a little bit, but in essence, yeah, a true
Mm.
story.
Oh, that's cool.
And certainly the kind of experiments that he did, and the fact that he found his eventual wife and he kept getting jobs at like the BBC and stuff, they were true. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
yeah,
That's
and it is
amazing.
the power of yes. And I've always felt like I do want to one day be that person who says yes to everything. And it's hard because, like you say, you come up with, for every reason why you say yes, there's like five for saying no. And it seems to be drummed in as naturally for whatever reason. Maybe it's education's fault or society's or the way we're brought up, or I have no idea. But our
Well,
go-to thing seems to be no. There's a
what
reason
are
not to do that.
what are some of your, like, growing up or currently, what were some of your hobbies or interests?
For me personally,
Yeah, yeah, for you personally.
growing up, sport for the most part.
Yeah, in what capacity? What did you play?
Playing rugby, playing football, watching it, just consume
All
sport.
right, so who was your favorite player when you were growing up? Like, who did you idolize as a player?
Gary Lineker.
What is his name?
Gary Lineker.
Gary Lineker.
Yeah, a
All
soccer
right,
player.
so yeah, I got it. And here's the big difference is that right now, if someone said to you, "Hey, do you want to, XYZ at 6:30 in the morning?" Uh, what would your typical your default answer be?
Ah,
Would be
it's too early, or I'd have to do
time.
this, and yeah, I don't have
Yeah,
time.
or time, blah, blah. But rewind the clock a little bit, and Gary Lineker says to you, I will do private one-on-one coaching with you. Unfortunately, I can only do it at 6:30 in the morning, and it's for 10 weeks straight. You think you could have figured out how to carve that time out?
Oh, just a little bit. Yeah, yes, with
Right?
like 10 explanation points.
Right. So the real question is, how bad do you want that thing? And the what I offer as when I coach people, as I say, and we always get so hung up on the how we're going to do it, because in that case you would say yes before figuring out any of the details, right? No question. It would be the quickest. If Vinny Colaiuta, who was my drumming idol, said, "I will give you private lessons at 4 in the morning, 5 days a week," I'm like, getting up at 4 in the morning. I guess that's how my life is now. Is I'm up at 4 in the morning. So what we do is we always come up with these, like, oh, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this or how this is going to work out. And what I do is often I'll sit across from someone. I will be at the coffee shop or something, and there'll be like a 2-story building across the street. And I say, all right, so on top of that building is $100,000 or pounds in cash. You have 15 minutes to get it. Are you going to get it?
Of course, yeah.
They're always going to get it. And I say, do you know how? And they say, no idea. I'm like, you would parachute in, or you would drop from a helicopter, you would climb, you'd scale the building to get that money in 15 minutes. You would be telling people on the street to get on each other's shoulders so you could climb up. You would figure out how you're going to get that money. So how badly do you want that thing that you're saying that you want? Like, is it something that really drives you? How badly do you want to move to San Diego? If you want to move there, you're going to figure out how it's going to work. So how badly do you want this life? Do you want this life of sort of time and financial freedom, or is it just something you're, namby-pamby about? And so that's it can really get people going, all right, wait a second. I really would. And I think what happened for me is I tasted it. And once you taste it, there's no going back.
Yeah. And I
So,
suppose
yeah.
it's just changing your mindset enough to be kind of desperate for the possibility. Like, you don't necessarily know what's going to be on the other side of that yes, but it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm desperate to see what's going to happen. So I need to say yes, because if I say no, I'll just forever wonder what if. But if I say
Right.
yes, I'll find out and I'll figure out how to get there, and who knows what's on the other side. And I suppose it's being excited for the unknown. Whereas when you're in the employable worlds, the fear of the unknown stops you from branching out. So that's so crazy to think that you can start off being scared of the unknown and then work your way up to being an entrepreneur, becoming a successful one, and being 100% excited by it.
Right. Right.
And
Well,
that,
and the opposite approach to that, Matthew, is that I didn't know that. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was very definitive of what I didn't want to do. So I had that as I could butt up against that and say, never doing this. I'm never doing this again. I'm not going to work an hour for $1. I'm not doing that. So I better figure something else out, or I'm not going to be able to feed my dog. Like that was really so that was the onus of it. And that's when I switched from, I've never done anything hourly since then. I've done, even when I was a freelancer, I switched to project basis versus hourly. You know, it was either retainer or it was a project. And that's even one subtle shift like that. If you're a freelancer of some sort, to say, I'm going to doing this now project, which instantly that frees your time. Just making that one shift to say, all right, instead of charging $25 an hour for copywriting or web design or whatever, I'm going to charge $1,200 for this project. Because now all of a sudden it takes your hours out of it. If you happen to get it done quicker,
still getting paid.
win.
Yeah.
You're still getting paid. And what I did, and I'll share this with any freelancers out there that are in your group, is that I would once I realized that, what I would do is you'd say you'd hire me to do your website, and I'd say great, and I would completely scope out the entire project. I might even provide you with like some Photoshop images of it before we even got that far along. But I'd scope out the entire thing. You'd read it, say, okay, this looks perfect, but we need to add this and this and this. We'd make those changes. Then we'd have a document that said, okay, this is the entire project, right? Now, you'd agree, I would agree, we'd sign it. I would then take that project, I put it right on Elance or Odesk as a project. And I'd put the entire thing up and say, this is exactly what I need. I would get 20 vendors to bid on it for me. They would say, okay, I can do this. It'll take 2 weeks and cost $450. I'd say, great. I'd hire them and say, all right, Matthew, here's your site. It's going to be $4,500 and it'll be done in 2 weeks. And I switched from being an employee to a creative director, and it freed up my time. I made tons more money with a 50th of the stress, and everything got done on time. And now all of a sudden I was a business owner versus a employee. And that was an easy shift to make once I decided to make it.
Genius. And yeah, it's that's got nothing to do with ability. It's not really got anything to do with confidence or being smart or anything. It's just changing a mindset. It's going, I no longer want to be defined by the clock. I want to be defined by my own thought process, my own freedom. And it's a really simple mindset, but so difficult for people to do.
And I learned that from a guy, Jonathan, that had actually hired me for one of these projects. I was just a hired gun for a web project. And after talking to him, I'm like, wait a second, I know 100 times more than this dude. He knew nothing about, and he was making tons of money and traveling the world, taking these web projects on, and would just hire out freelancers and upsell the bid. And I was like, oh, why am I not doing this? Why, after however many years it was, 12 years, 13 years of doing it at that point, why was I slogging through doing hourly rates when I should be a creative director at that point? I was already a creative director. Someone hired me to do that as a Fortune 500 company, and I left there and went right back to being an employee again. It was just like, why did those things not connect in my brain? I had no idea, but they don't sometimes.
No, but like you say, you only know what you know, and at the time, it's hard to kind of know exactly what you want. But then once you get a taste, it's done.
That's right.
And
game over.
It's like, for me, I would struggle so much to go back into employment because I've had a taste of working for myself, having the freedom to, do meetings for different times. And, there's times when I think it'd be so much easier to go and work for someone else where you've got the defined wage and, it's easy, but it's like, it's just not really an option because once you get a taste for it, it's so hard. And I feel a lot of people out there will appreciate that and go, yes, like I would find it so hard, but I feel like your advice from the mistake that you were made was just open up your mind, be more full of yeses, open to the opportunity, and it's just switch of a mindset. It's kind of going from, it's kind of like having a conscious decision to say, I'm no longer going to be a glass half empty guy, and I'm going to become a glass half full guy. Just making that conscious effort and filling your world with positivity and see what happens.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Simple.
So yeah, you nailed it.
Brilliant. I'm
Yeah.
wowed. I'm wowed. I'm in wowza right now. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm not even gonna sort of end on anything else because I just feel like that's a perfect way to end it. It's been a
Good.
show full of valuable insights. So thank you so much for joining me and showering us with that insight. Great.
Showering. Well, it was my pleasure. I'm so excited that the Skype held up. So
Yes.
we're able to do
Brilliant.
that. Thank you, hotel. Well done. Really great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's all that Google fiber optics you have over in
I know.
America, you know.
Yeah, that's all. That's what we have. Yeah, that's what
Man,
it is.
come to England and you're working on like 7 megabytes. You've got no
Yeah,
chance in hotels.
it's not. Yeah, well, we can only wish.
In a couple
Anyway,
more years. Thank you, and to you, viewer or listener, thank you for joining us. From Michael and me, it's peace. Cheers.
Later.
And there you have it, another session of the Purple Coffee Podcast at an end. A humongous thanks to you for joining us and being part of this entire journey. It's a pleasure to have you on board, and a equally huge thanks to Michael for being not just part of this very podcast, but my book, The Success Mistake. As I am sure you are buzzing right now, you will appreciate just what Michael has thrown at us today. It's an inspiring journey, and I just love how he finds it difficult to pinpoint a particular area. Like he says in the interview, you only know what you know, and hindsight is a bit of a bee like that. But it's all about just looking out for those warning signs, paying attention to what's around you, and paying attention to what's inside you. If you go towards things that make and bring real meaning into your life, you can't really go wrong. It might take a little bit of time, but great things start to click together. And I just adore his entire outlook of saying yes to opportunity and embracing possibility and those amazing what ifs, but saying no to all the chaos, saying no to the meaningless dinners and, the impressive client because it'll look good on your website and it will pay you a lot of money, but won't bring any real meaning or value into your life. So it's a great outlook to have, and I think it's something all young and new entrepreneurs in particular can take a lot from, because this is the kind of thing that clicks into place after a while. But by listening to people like Michael, it might click into place sooner rather than later. I've taken a lot from it. I hope you have too. So be sure to head to tdog.co/purplecoffee32 and check out Michael's world. You should be subscribing to his podcast. It's such an amazing one. He speaks so much sense and has some great guests. Honestly, you can thank me later. This is one you need to follow. And everything else in his world, he's a great person to follow, and be sure to reach out to him. He's very approachable. So that's basically it. Whilst there, please consider subscribing, rating and reviewing the Purple Coffee Podcast, be it through iTunes or Stitcher or however you're listening to this. It's all at tdog.co/purplecoffee32. Any feedback and help you can help spread the good word is much appreciated. So from me, a big thanks. I cannot wait to connect with you next time. Keep it awesome. Keep it cool. Keep it on the flip.